All right, welcome everyone. I'm Brian Aquart, and I'm joined by two incredible leaders, friends, and fellow presidential leadership scholars, Kevin Schmiegel and Ed Magee, to reflect on what truly started as a simple idea and became something much bigger, the summer of 67. For 67 days, they shared the stories of presidential leadership scholars, alumni, and staff who've committed their lives to service. What they discovered was that when you tell those stories consistently and intentionally, you don't just inspire others, you strengthen community, momentum, and purpose. So we're here today to unpack why this mattered, the lessons learned along the way, and the plans to build on it in the future, not just as a reflection, but as a model others can use to elevate their missions. So gentlemen, good to see you all again. Good to be in the space, albeit virtually, right?
Yeah, it's great to be here with you again, Brian. And Ed, great to be with you, brother. Marine.
Without a doubt.
Good to see you. Well, real short, I'm a retired Marine. I served for 20 years from 1989 to 2009, and then found my way back to service a couple of years after I transitioned out of the military. I was a nonprofit leader for a decade, led 3 national nonprofits that impacted more than 4 million service members, veterans, and their families. And about 4 years ago, I started what I call an experiment called Zero Mills, a social impact service disabled veteran-owned small business with my best friend of 30 years and the last chief operating officer of the last nonprofit I led. So we're really about creating military thriving cultures and communities and changing the narrative about veterans and their families across the workplace and across society. But more to follow on that. And again, great to be here today.
Yeah,
Awesome.
definitely. Ed, how about you?
I'm just the guy who carries Kevin's bag, so he needs one of those. He needs his OPSO. So Ed Magee, also veteran, U.S. Marine Corps, 1987 to 2002. Very proud colleague of the both of you with the Presidential Leadership Scholars Program. I'm currently the Chief Operating Officer of the Thomas F. Frisch Junior College of Medicine here in Nashville, doing some governance work, some board work, and quite honestly, really appreciating the value of place and this community here in Nashville and opportunities to really plug in and serve and also help veterans as they transition to plug into the community so that we achieve what Zero Mills is working towards, and that's veterans thriving.
I love to hear that. And so, Kevin, I want to kick it off by really starting with you. When you envisioned this summer of 67, what was the spark? Why did this project matter to you personally? And what did you hope people would take away from it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe that was at the beginning of this year. I think our experience at Presidential Leadership Scholars was life-changing for me as someone who just turned 58. Looking back, I never thought I would have that type of experience this late in life. You go into this room full of 57 change makers, community builders, and individually you see these remarkable people from all walks of life, every race, every religion, every politic coming together, and they form this community of community builders. So I think there were 2 things. One was, how do you look at these individual stories, these amazing people that I never known before? There was only one of the other 56 scholars that I knew before. For me, that's remarkable in itself. But how do you shine a spotlight on them? And then think about a community of community builders, the collective impact when you put all those peoples together and you string those stories into one narrative. That's where the magic happens. It's not what we do individually. That's what I learned at PLS. I was so much stronger and so much more empowered to make change because of these brotherhoods and sisterhoods that we formed, our tribe. It's a new tribe for me. And I never thought that would happen at this point in my life. And when I saw it, I wanted to tell those stories, not only individually, but again, collectively. Like, what is the potential to make greater change together?
Yeah, no, I think that was one of the really beautiful things that came out of it, and something that even as we got to know each other throughout the program, we then learned so much more about them through this actual campaign. Now, Ed, you jumped in early and helped bring structure and rhythm to the campaign. What made you say yes? And what did this experience even teach you about storytelling at scale?
Yeah, well, I mean, we joke a little about it, but Kevin is yin, I'm yang. Kevin is incredible ideator and vision and strategy. And I'm a good ops guy, so I know how to actually really take ideas and put them into action. And what's funny is we've got such a shared background. We were already finishing each other's sentences. Kevin approached me with the topic, and I mean, it was just like, yes, it didn't require any thought. And then, quite honestly, we just started leaning into each other's strengths. I think the moment was critical because we were done with the program, and there was this sense of missing out and the sense of just like separation anxiety and how do we stay connected. And it was so amazing. And, it was just an interesting moment. It just made sense at the time. And then the way that Kevin framed it, he had done this before, so he had experience running a campaign like this. So I did what I do best, and that's figuring out how to operationalize. And then Kevin really just helped to articulate and move and just create the framework for what would be an incredibly successful 67 days of texting each other probably 10 times in the morning. Right when we got up, we got done more between 8 o'clock or 6 and 8 o'clock in the morning than most folks do all day. So we both played to our strengths, and it was a lot of fun, and I appreciate getting to learn my brother that much better through the work.
I think we were literally building the bus as we were driving
As
it
we were driving, that's
You
it.
were.
That's
You
it.
were.
every day.
Absolutely. And I love that piece you mentioned too, like the operationalizing it, that structure, meeting the story, because that combination really powered everything that came afterwards. So would love to talk a little bit about the process, right? And so for those who aren't familiar with it, you two built something, as you mentioned, that ran every single day for more than 2 months. Most people can't even keep like a 10-day streak alive on social media. So what did it take to keep that kind of momentum?
Well, I
Yeah.
think I'll just start by referencing something Ed said, because I did 2 campaigns like these before. So the first was recognizing Medal of Honor recipients, and there were 66 living ones at the time, and it was hugely successful, but their stories were already told. So you take a citation from a Medal of Honor and you're able to weave a further story with, I guess, a forward and an afterward. It wasn't like a lot of work because the story had been told on the battlefields from every war. So it was easy to shape from World War II to today these heroes that were known in society as the 66 Living Medal of Honor recipients. And then I did a series called Unsung Heroes, 100 days, but people that are going about their business as nonprofit leaders, the Davids in this giant space that aren't the ones that everyone knows about. And I was shining a spotlight on them, and I knew their stories personally. So we to your point, Brian, we didn't really know everyone the way we knew them after Ed helped me
Where we
write
thought
these
we knew
stories.
them.
We just
Right.
said, hey, we're going to do this. And I think if Ed admits it, we bit off a little bit more than we could chew because we didn't know them like we thought we did. And we had to create structure, which is where Ed came in. Like I was way in over my head because I wasn't starting at an advantage. We were starting at a deficit and we continually had to make it up. If it weren't for Ed, we never would have done it.
Nah, this is definitely teamwork. So I think what I had to work with was a very clear vision of what good looks like, because our first experiment was on me. So Kevin kind of did the interview. I mean, we worked together on what that first one could look like, and I immediately had. I mean, he nailed the structure in the first take, so we kind of understood what it needed to look like. But then we probably hit 3 phases of figuring out how to work as efficiently as possible. In the first phase, we pushed the interview questions out to everyone and assumed that people would do their homework. Now, here's a little PLS insight. You're in this amazing program, you've got homework, you also have a full-time job and a life. And you're trying to work in the homework with, life keeps on lifing while you're in this program. So one of the early assumptions that I think Kevin and I tested early and often was people's willingness to do homework after we were done with the program. So he articulated a very clear vision. I was able to write the first one, or wrote the first one together. And then I started looking for, all right, how do we do this in a way that minimizes the pain and anxiety of more homework from the program, but also delivers, with that conciseness and consistency that Kevin articulated in literally the first time we did the message. So that evolved over time.
No, I love that. That's that operational lens that you talk about, and then making that campaign actually sustainable. You know, Kevin, when participation dipped, right? Ed talks about those three phrases. When they dip, maybe energy waned, truthfully, maybe on your parts as well. How did you not only keep people engaged, but also yourselves engaged? And what muscles did this stretch for the both of you?
Yeah. Again, I think initially I thought it would be easier than it was. I'll just start with that. Ed pointed it out perfectly. These are really, really busy people, which is why I was so drawn to telling their stories in the first place and encouraging them to do the same. I think this was largely born out of my own experience consulting nonprofit leaders that I did the 100 Unsung Heroes on. The reason they were unsung is they were hesitant to tell their own story, right? So I had a experience and I didn't ask them permission. I just made them part of the series. I think part of the stumbling block for us is we felt we had to ask for permission. And I think where we really, really spearheaded success was we started not asking them for permission. We started doing research on them and sharing with them what their story was. And then they're like, wow, how did you figure that out? How did you do that? And then they were bought in. And the other thing was FOMO. We started looking at other presidential leadership scholars classes. We started looking at faculty, and we created some momentum by getting them to see that if you're not sharing your story, we're going to go to others. This is all about them recognizing that if they share their story, if they create a voice, they can make a greater impact on the causes they want to affect.
Yeah. And this is where Marines start doing their thing. This is an inevitable conclusion. We were going to get to that 67 couple. If we had to call in moms, parents, uncles, relatives, what we were gonna accomplish the mission. But the beauty of PLS was staff and faculty, incredible stories. We hit up the alumni at some point, incredible stories, and they got excited about it. And I think, what gives you endurance, you've got to stop, you've got to drink. There were moments that poured back into our cup, to keep this thing going. And you'd see kind of attention and focus start to wane. We would riff in the morning and go, all right, who else, how else? And then we'd get it fired up again. And I think it was just playing off of each other's strengths. It was an inevitable conclusion that we were going to get this thing done. And, every period, and I talked about the three periods, like the first one, we were interviewing everybody. So Kevin, he created the structure. I created some questions. We made an interview, and then we asked folks to interview themselves. And then that got too hard. So then we started interviewing folks. So it was a very transactional, like learning their story. And it was fascinating. And every time I actually interviewed one of my classmates, you just learn these other dimensions of them. It was like mad respect, like, wow,
Yeah.
that's so cool. But that's a lot of work and it takes a lot of time. So then we had to get smarter. How do you work smarter and faster? Then we started doing our own research, and then we would write the articles and present it to them. And that created another iterative. And the balance was sometimes folks wanted to articulate things in their voice. And what Kevin would balance is how do you remain consistent so that it is a campaign level of consistency, but you also create, unique narratives and voices. And I think we learned that in the middle. And then by the third leg, we kind of had stuff dialed, and it was just the pressure campaign. It was like, how can we embarrass folks? How can we put pressure on them? How do we, it's like, how do we get the work done and get the feedback? Because, to Kevin's point, permission was an incredible part of this, but we made it as easy as possible for them to say yes.
And we were two Marines on a mission. Like I think it was literally we were in combat together, getting them cooking and jabbing, getting them into this because we love them. Like we love you, Brian. We care about them. And the more we read their stories and the more other scholars saw things they didn't know after we were together for 6 months. And we created this incredible relationship and bond. We weren't going to give up on them. And listen, we didn't realize the full potential. Like, let's be honest, because in a typical campaign, you build momentum because people are working together to support one another's stories, to comment, to engage, to literally amplify each other and the collective impact that we can make together. That's okay, but you could see the potential in it. Like, you could see when things were working, how well they worked when everyone got behind it, because one story would take hold and everyone was reading it, liking it, commenting, sharing, reposting, and getting the word out about these remarkable people who they were proud to serve alongside. That's what it was all about.
You want to tell
Yeah.
the story about Tracy and just the response that she got? She did
Yeah.
not want to tell her story. Did not want to tell her story. And it was
Yeah,
like,
tell it.
"Oh, sister, you're going to do it." Tell them about Tracy.
Well, I think the biggest thing is it was like pulling teeth, trying to get her to do it. And when she finally did, like, she's a remarkable woman who
Yes.
was the first of her kind in the Army, right? Like, one of the first women to fly an airframe. And she didn't want to tell her story. I think the most meaningful thing that happened is when I posted it was great. When she shared her story, it blew up on LinkedIn. And what was really meaningful at the time was Tracy was in transition, right? The PLS class was in transition. She was thinking differently about what she wanted to do next in her life, where she wanted to find meaning. And all these people commented in these beautiful comments about her and who she was as a person. And that is, again, that's where the magic happens. It's like she didn't even realize how much the world appreciated what she's brought to the table in and out of uniform. Like, that to me is remarkable. And why is that, Brian? Because Tracy is too humble to tell her story,
Bingo.
right? And when she did, what she got out of it was validation for who she really is. And that's what we wanted for every one of our 54 other presidential leadership scholars that were part of the program with us.
Yeah, that was the
Yeah.
thing. I don't want to tell my own story. I'm not good at it. It's like, be
We
quiet.
got you.
Be
Yeah.
quiet. We got you. And one of those people was Kevin, by the way. So kudos to you, Brian, for getting that one done. So
We had to. And that's what I love about it. I remember seeing those comments in on Tracy's post. So heartwarming, so personal that it just truth as an outsider, or quote unquote outsider looking in, is like, oh, I bet you they must feel good about that because she's getting the recognition that she deserves. And a lot of this comes down to intention. We're not just creating content for the sake of creating content, but we're actually creating connection. And that's what's huge about what you all did. Would love to talk a little bit about the impact. So the campaign had incredible reach, but it also revealed something, as you mentioned. Not everyone leaned in. That's an important story. The importance of people telling their own stories, which truthfully gets me going. What did you learn about how leaders engage or don't engage with storytelling? And tell us a little bit about some of the metrics or impressions or engagement overall from the campaign.
And I think for me, I'll just speak about the unrealized potential, because I don't think we ever got to the point where we were firing on all cylinders. To, like, if you're going every day and you're trying to drive a campaign, I mean, we learned this at Presidential Leadership Scholars in one of our courseworks, like, be prepared. The more prepared you are, the better the outcomes. And I don't think we did a good job. I didn't do a good job of communicating, like, what we really needed people to do, regardless of the fact that they're very busy and didn't do their homework, like we called it. I think if we did a better job of tying it to an analogy that we all shared as Presidential Leadership Scholars, homework was one of the words that we used. And a lot of us were guilty because we were busy. But if they understood, for me, more strategically about what this could do for our collective community, our communities as a group, then we would have created that immediacy and sense of urgency, because they would have realized that they were part of not achieving the full potential. And our class was really, really good at achieving the full potential when everyone understood that they were on a mission together. And I think that that's a reflection of us not articulating that in the proper way. So I'll let Ed talk about the metrics, because I was tracking it and there are some that like went off the charts, but because those people put the effort in to contributing to it, And then a lot of us who were kind of core participants, you were too, Brian, you would engage every day with the post and make sure that your audience was seeing it. So the metrics were good, but let's not make a mistake in saying they couldn't have been a lot better. I think that's important to recognize.
Yeah, so I would say on the community building side, there's got to be infrastructure and there's got to be motivation. So the infrastructure around presidential leadership scholars is amazing while you're in the program. Some of that infrastructure falls away, and I think that's one of the things that Kevin and I learned very quickly to get folks to volunteer the work. We had to show them that there was some infrastructure and we were going to get it to the other end. So that was our responsibility. We had to build that. Part two is just the motivation. Whenever you build community, there's got to be, there's got to be inspiration and motivation. And I think what was happening was like when folks, Nikki Marin, hers got post, you just would read and see the level of engagement. And that was constant, it was motivation for folks. And when we started introducing staff members, because we knew we were going to need to include staff. And I remember it was probably about three-quarters of the way through, Kevin and I one morning, like, you want to go with the alumni? And it took all of about two texts back and forth. It's like, yeah, let's go for it. And then we posted to the alumni, showed them what we were doing. And that day we probably had three new folks to work with. So the combination of infrastructure and motivation, and then they got excited about it. That was the stitching together of community. The second piece of this is a marketing campaign. Marketing campaigns require people to buy in. You've got to have a great product. Folks have to amplify it. And the big thing with, really, really great marketing campaigns, a lot of it is word of mouth. And on LinkedIn, that means people are liking it, they're commenting on it, and they're reposting. So we had a core group of folks with pretty substantial followings. And when the machine was working at its best, people were liking, they were commenting, and they were reposting. And I believe it was over 400,000 impressions for the whole campaign, right, Kevin? So, I mean, it was pretty significant. It was over a long period of time, but we had a really, really good combination of infrastructure and then inspiration that, helped to get us over the finish line.
Yeah, I love that. And Kevin, you mentioned something earlier about how people needing to tell their stories, right? So what responsibility do we have to tell our own stories, especially when the mission depends on it?
I think it's one of the top three things a leader needs to do. I mean, obviously, you have to have a vision and execute it. That's number one. The second one is relationship development, partnerships, stewardship to develop and grow your business, your nonprofit. And the third is storytelling. You are the chief storyteller. And there is no better way to build a brand. There is no better way to grow your business than through an effective storytelling campaign. And it is the responsibility of a leader to do that. It doesn't fall on the chief marketing officer. It doesn't fall on your social media manager. It falls on you. You are the voice of the organization. And there isn't a single organization that I've led or I've been a part of, from the Marine Corps to three nonprofits to two businesses, where I don't say we. I use the first person because it is my organization. It is my team. It is my passion. It is my purpose. And if you fall short, there's only one person to blame. There's only one person to blame. And that drives the behavior across your team. It literally dictates that everyone else gets involved. Everyone has a role to play in storytelling and creating that voice for the organization as a whole. But it starts with you. So I think that the people who are part of this, they should learn from it and they should use it as part of their own practices for the enterprises that they run and lead.
Yeah. And I think you have to be your own chief marketing officer for your personal brand. And when you start having those personal brand conversations with really humble leaders, they start squirming like engineers when you have them sit in a circle. I mean, it's just like, ah! They freak out. But I mean, Kevin hit the nail on the head. It's one of your leadership responsibilities because language is the tool for creating culture. And your chief responsibility as a leader is to create culture in your organization. I can't tell you how many times folks you'd see the narrative getting told from the perspective of we, And then when we were interviewing, you go, all right, well, what's the I? I mean, there was a whole language around getting that figured out. And it was just, it was equally humbling and inspiring to watch folks navigate the storytelling process about themselves. And quite honestly, Brian, I think you should go back and teach a section in PLS on that narrative and that storytelling, because you do a brilliant job of doing that in your work. And quite honestly, just there were, I was shocked at how much I didn't know about my colleagues and classmates when I got done. It was almost embarrassing.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I agree. This obviously hits near and dear to my heart because when people need to think about that narrative architecture, how they're showing up. There's nobody better to tell their story than you. And so like that is something that is so crucial. So Kevin, once it ended, summer 7, it truthfully didn't end when the post stopped, right? The campaign may have ended, but now it's become this starting line for new ideas. Each of us has taken something from this, turned it into a way to help others replicate the model. I mean, Ed, you talked about, something I'm working on. Like it's helped me think about certain things as well. Now, Kevin, you're launching the Service Project Masterclass, where you're teaching nonprofit leaders how to run their orgs like businesses and actually generate the resources to fulfill their mission. So how did this campaign fulfill that vision? And what can participants expect from this type of experience?
Yeah, I think first of all, it made me recognize that telling one story at a time isn't enough. If you think about the work that we do, like in our day to day, maybe we're lucky enough to impact 10,000 people in our lives, like 10,000 individual leaders through different types of touch points. I think for all of us, particularly for me in this process, I realized that at 58 years old, I'm getting to the end of my chapter in being able to reach that 10,000 milestone. Well, what if I created something where I could reach 10 million people or 100,000 or a million? But how do you scale something like that? And this created a sense of urgency for me that I didn't have, because no matter what we say, those humble leaders, the real change makers, the real community builders are going to have their heads down and they're going to continue to do their work like no one else in this country. So how do you take our experience and what brings us joy, what we're really good at, and bundle that up in a way where you can scale what you want to do exponentially so that you leave a lasting impact on the world, like create real change. So what I learned is I have an opportunity to take everything that I learned. I wrote a blog when I left nonprofit work called The 8 Lessons Learned as a Nonprofit CEO. And what it amounts to is running your nonprofit like a business. The Service Project will shine a light on these leaders, just like we did for 67 days, and I'll call them out. But what I'm going to do, what I have done, is created a masterclass called the Nonprofit CEO Accelerator. And there are 10 modules. And I'm going to create little cohorts, just like we did at Presidential Leadership Scholar. I'm going to hand pick people who are not telling their story, who are not running their nonprofits like a business. And I'm going to help them scale them exponentially by pouring everything that I did experientially into them. Not a coursework that you would see in a major university, not something that you would see online typically, but best practices and lessons learned in the trenches. And that coursework will then inform products that they deliver. And then I'll do one-on-one sessions with them to follow up and make real introductions to funders, to relationships, to potential partners that will believe in them as much as I do. But they have to take the steps to go through the learning and apply those principles in real time. And I'm not going to do this for everyone. I'm going to handpick them and I'm going to bring them together just like we were brought together. And then I'm going to teach them the principles in larger groups, right? And then think about that coursework then being online and people being able to reach back, find those tools they need, find those lessons that I learned and apply them themselves. So this was all based on that experience and seeing the full potential leading up to September 11th, is when I launched the Service Project. And actually, you know what? It was also people like you, Brian, that encouraged me to do it. Ed, Polly, who said, hey, why are you just doing these things one at a time, one person at a time? When you have all this knowledge, get it out there. And the best way for me to do that was to create this masterclass, this coursework, and I actually got help from some of the faculty at PLS in refining it and making it better.
That's really cool. And now, Ed, from your side, right? You've, like you said, you've always been this like architect of discipline and execution. If an organization came to you tomorrow and said, "Look, we want a summer of '67 of our own," what's the first thing you'd have them put in place?
Hire somebody to do it. Is not going to be me. I wish I could actually say no to people. I think I'll articulate what I think is the most important thing. And whenever folks ask me, I always test the waters with, all right, so what are you doing to make yourself better? Because I think there's got to be a level of motivation where folks want to take the work out of the equation. And it's like, no, I watch how Kevin works, I watch how you work, and it makes me excited to help you in your work because you're so committed to it. Because I get to, do a little bit of borrowing of your passion and it pours into my cup too. So, I think I always gauge folks' willingness to put in the work. And for some of our colleagues and classmates, they've reached out. I've had 10 other side projects. I've had some of my classmates, like coaching. Adria is coaching my daughter now because she's such an outstanding coach. So by virtue of us like iterate, helping each other out, we're building into our community. And
Yes.
I think that's the big veteran message around finding your purpose is you don't have to do this alone. You've got to lean on folks, but you also have to be willing to put in the work. And when you put in that work, the return on investment is just incredible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, and then like once I'm here, we talk about all this structure that exists. Obviously, I think that's then I come in a little bit with my storyline focus, where we're helping leaders how they keep showing up with clarity, their consistency, and their presence about that narrative architecture we talked about. And that what on my end, right, as I'm hearing you all talk about this, as we've worked closely with this, it means, helping people articulate who they are and how they serve. You all mentioned something that's so important, Kevin, you especially, that there needs to be some intention there. Like I can't force it out of you. There does have to be some want there. But once you get that and once you get the flow, that's how people start building like their voices and trust truthfully over time. So we got like this full picture, right? This campaign model, master class. Ed, you got the operational spine. I'm working with the leader voice. It's like this three-legged PLS stool that we have
Love it.
going on.
I think,
Yeah.
I actually think what Ed said and what you just mentioned, there has to be a willing party. And I think if people are willing, like there is an opportunity for me and Ed to help them form a campaign and Ed to bring the operational side and me coaching. I would just say more intuitively and instinctively on things that I've done before and experientially. And then I think there's a handoff too to like continue down that storyline path where they're working with people like you. Listen, they have to want to do it, and then we just have to offer it. I think the three of us could easily work together and bring them along, but you have to start with someone that wants to do it. And I think I said that without really thinking about it. When they picked presidential leadership scholars, they said we weren't the 57 best, right? But what they probably saw were willing subjects, people that really did want to grow, people who really did want to make a greater impact, people who wanted to learn from one another. And that is where the magic happened. So you have to start with that. That's probably the number one criteria. And if they are, then the three of us bring different things to the table. And I think they feed off one another. I think, and if you took the other 54 people, we could hand them off to probably half of those 54 who could give them other tools they need, like coaching, which I'm not good at because I say, you should do this, you should do that. You wouldn't want me as your coach.
And I think like what the moments that give you joy. So in the mornings when Kevin would post, or actually by the end we were doing 3 a day. So when Kevin would post, here's the final product, and you would just see the way that people reacted to it because there were pictures, and there was just such joy in the final product. That was the self-licking ice cream cone, right? So that poured into our cut that got us motivated for the next one. and you just see the professionalism and the exceptionalism and what did Roy say? It's building bridges to a better us in USA. I mean, you saw that happening in those moments where Kevin's like, and there it is. And it was like, boop, that bridge is getting built. I mean, that was pure joy for me.
I love that. I think, this conversation proves that when you combine that structure, story, and service, you create this type of momentum that truthfully lasts far beyond any campaign. And we've really demonstrated that with some of the things that you all mentioned what we're doing now. So for orgs who are ready to build their own version, Kevin and Ed have the playbook, but you need to hire someone else because Ed's not doing it. But the campaign model.
Get Ed to do a couple.
You get Ed to do. Oh, see, there you go.
I can't
See,
say no.
there you go. That's the ace in the
I want to
hole
fill
right
your
there.
cup, Ed Magee. I want to fill your cup, brother.
I love it. But when you need the campaign model, the cadence, the ops, they got it covered. And for leaders who are obviously ready to clarify their message and elevate their presence, that's where Storyline by Kingswood comes in. That's where I can help out there. And also for nonprofit CEOs who are ready to scale their impact, as Kevin mentioned, his service project masterclass is the perfect next step. So summer of 67 reminded us that storytelling truthfully isn't a side project. It's leadership in action. And as Ed mentioned, it's really about building those bridges. So I want to thank you all for being here, and thanks to both of you for making this movement what it is. Look forward to continuing to be in fellowship with both of you all, my brothers. But thank you all for taking the time today.
Always
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.